We are live. Peace and love, everybody. This is Brother Garfield from the Dagger Squad channel. We are a research group. We basically research all forms of history. We specialize in Judeo-Christian background as far as archaeology, anthropology, genetics, linguistics, and even history to a lesser extent. Yeah, I'm being funny when I say that. But I deal with history and I like to meet new people. And someone told me about this gentleman like a month ago. They told me about this gentleman by the name of Rob Burnett. And I said, who is this Rob Burnett guy? And I said, you know what? He's in Zimbabwe and he's near the Lemba people, the Remba, and maybe he has some information that could help us in understanding the culture better. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me present to you for the first time I'm meeting him, Mr. Rob Burnett.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you, and let's give you a few of my own personal opinions and then dodge all the brickbats that are thrown at me.
All right, peace and love to everybody that's in the chat, by the way, too. It's early in the morning here in New York. It's 9:31, so you're 6 hours pretty much ahead of us. And I've never met anybody from Zimbabwe, black or white. I've never met anybody. So this is a first time I meet somebody in Zimbabwe. Where are you from originally?
I am a Zimbabwean, despite everybody thinking my accent is English. We're third generation Zimbabwean.
Wow, look at that. All right. So our people here in the United States, we have a group called group of folks who feel like they descend from the Lemba. That's what made me get fascinated with the Lemba. And of course, the Lemba, there's some history that attached them to Jewish stuff and all that stuff. So a lot of people want to claim they're the Jews or the lost tribes and all this craziness. But I said, let me talk to I want to talk to a regular guy. And I think you fit that regular guy. You know, you fit like you're not a big timer with a PhD and I'm this, I'm that with 100 books. But you seem like a regular guy. So I said, let me interview this guy to find out what's going on in Zimbabwe on a whole, not just the Lemba, but as a culture. What is the most fascinating thing? I'm sorry, I'm doing this wrong. Why don't you give us a little background of who Rob Burnett is and what you do and what you specialize in?
Okay, so basically, I'm a trained archaeologist. I dabble in history. I dabble in botany and things like that. And I'm really fascinated in the heritage of the region, and in particular, the presenting it to the general public. I am not an ivory tower academic, and as a result, probably clash with them quite a lot. Because I believe, well, you'll see, for many years I was a school teacher. I was involved in curricular development through the ministry and things like that for schools, and have lectured at university. I think the importance of heritage is that we tackle it and discuss it. We take it out of the ivory towers and we let people discuss it. Otherwise, we have strange discourses going off which are completely wrong and that reflect modern issues, possibly divorced from the past.
So would it be right for me to say that you are more hands-on than the regular guys?
No, I think they're hands-on. They're hands-on in terms of they're dealing with the documents, they're dealing with students. I'm just a guy that likes to take some of that material, condense it down so that it's consumable for the general public, okay, which unfortunately the vast majority of academia seems to have lost that contact since the 60s.
Okay. So growing up in Zimbabwe, what was it like for you growing up in Zimbabwe?
Quite difficult, because obviously at my age, I grew up in the last days of Southern Rhodesia, Smith's Rhodesia. And being white, of a privileged background, obviously you were in that side of the war. Whether or not you necessarily believed in it, obviously because you're white, you're expected to, and everybody thinks you do, even to this day. So as you will know from some of my Facebook posts, I purposely try to stir up occasionally those people that sort of haven't moved on and are unable to move on.
Yeah,
and I'm particularly at the moment in identities because of my marriage across racial boundaries. I'm particularly interested in the whole issue of identity. What constitutes different groups? Why do we pick on some things, be it color or heritage, or in this particular instance, the idea of trying to draw a direct link to Judeo-Islamic traditions of the Middle East here in Africa, miles from there. What is the reason we do this? What do we create?
Right.
Why do we do it? Why do we do this to separate ourselves from the other? So that's the sort of currently my real big bugbear.
Right. I was watching a video of a Lemba priest recently. I mean, I had it for years, and he was saying they started doing circumcision in the 1900s, right? And I'm saying to myself, if they're connecting themselves to an ancient culture, I think that's true what he's saying, that we just started doing circumcision. So we're definitely not an ancient culture. We probably adapted from another culture. What do you think about that? I think he was a Venda priest or a Lemba priest. I don't recall.
Yeah, he'll be one of the South African Venda. I don't deny that the Venda, the Lemba or Remba, as we call them in Zimbabwe, exist. They're a community. They have certain traditions, but I tend to get very upset when people try to say there's necessarily a genetic link, like the lost tribe of Israel that came down from there and got lost, or they are some group of the 12 tribes from the Falashas that come down here. We forget the whole issue of identity and culture is dynamic, and acculturation, adapting and absorbing and sometimes expressing things and other times not expressing things, is the essential element of human existence. The human I, the identity is what we choose to express and what we choose not to. And sometimes we'll choose groups, I hate to say this, I don't want to say to copy, but we want to link ourselves to a group because we consider it gives us some sort of power, some sort of status in terms of political or economic hierarchy. So I do believe that the Remba probably have some sort of background in those traditions. But it doesn't necessarily mean that there were some lost tribe of Israel, because that sort of history ties very much into the Rhodesian myth of Great Zimbabwe. And, we also need to understand that people and genetics, genes, have moved for thousands of years. There's no such thing as, oh, now suddenly we're an international world and we're trading with China or we're trading with Australia. Don't tell me that hasn't been happening for centuries. And down the whole east coast of Africa, we've had traders who would have come from a Judeo-Islamic background, possibly even pre-Islam, who would have been coming up and down the coast, and they were never celibate.
You know what I ask you? Does the Rhodesian Zimbabwe history have a lot to do with want to identify? Because I look at it as sometimes the Lemba leaders, they want to separate themselves from the traditional folks, the indigenous folks, because they see them as being I don't want to say born losers. Let me take that out of my head. They don't want to look at themselves as rejects in a society that has been propped up with the white man's face. Yeah, so they want to be equal. So they want to be equal or better. So they say, let's just claim this to give us a high status rapidly instead of building generation to generation.
I agree with you. So what there is underlying a lot of this is this unfortunate assumption of some sort of superior other that we want to associate with. And as you say, we now need to separate ourselves. We are not the general peasants over there. We are somebody that's got some sort of blood in us that makes us more superior than you. And of course, that plays into modern politics, not necessarily national politics, maybe even just the local village politics, right out in the rural areas where selection of who's going to be the headman or an elected ward chairman, you get this sort of unfortunate ethno-stereotyping and ethno-association, which is the unfortunate continuity of the colonial experience.
When you say colonial experience, do you speak of Islam having a root to the Judeo-Christian rituals or system or belief system that actually connects to Judaism, which is actually the father figure to both religions? But as far as the influence and the tradition that you spoke of earlier, where you said that you do think that they have some sort of connection to that, partly to that culture, are you saying it's because of Islam?
I'm saying that the link would have been both possibly Islam and Judaism, because both of them traded. There's no, they both would have come down and traded, and they have left certain traits and people have selected them. But, we talk a lot about the Lemba, but here in Zimbabwe, there's another group of, now for want of a better word, they call themselves Black Jews. Now, they are only a very small part of the country, and they are very strict conservative Jews. And if you go a little bit of digging around in history, basically what it was a small community sort of based on a particular Jewish trader that came in the early colonial days, and these are his offspring, or those that have been influenced by him. And so they accepted it and they took it and they express it. It doesn't necessarily mean they're directly linked to the Falashas or to Israel.
Yeah.
And so that's how I see this whole Remba story. This thing about Remba and becoming increasingly more fundamentalist, Islam, let's say, or Judaism, it has to be understood in terms of modern politics. They're trying to set themselves apart. And look, it happens, especially because I'm involved in a cross-cultural marriage. I have quite a lot to do with the mixed race community here in Zimbabwe. There we see a similar situation where it is the tradition of the usually white father is emphasized as being the tradition of that community. We've got this male line is emphasized, and the female line's always forgotten. And I think for them are exactly the same.
Right. Is it true that you've had in the Zimbabwe region, you've had Jewish, Asian, possibly Chinese, many pre-Islamic, also Islamic traders that have come along the way to that region? Is that true?
Yeah, 100% true. And that's why I do believe that you get, well, certainly we know from the genetics, there is the certain genes which show that they were there. And they were simply traders. And their genes were mixed in, and the offspring through time have chosen certain things and chosen not other things. So like you were saying, this now re-emphasizing circumcision, that's only 100 years ago. This sort of genetic separation may have been 200-300 years ago.
Right.
So again, I'm talking about we choose things, what makes us more important. And in South Africa, this is a far more important debate.
Yeah. There's an issue about what's called the Ngoma drum. I don't know if I pronounce it right. It's Ngoma.
The dear old
that
drum.
has to do with the Ark of the Covenant. This is the controversial thing that's going on because a lot of people claim the Ethiopians, a matter of fact, and I'm not even making light of this, that a bunch of them died trying to protect what they think is the Ark of the Covenant in Ethiopia. But the people in Zimbabwe or the Lemba may say they have the drum, they have the Ark of the Covenant. What do you say about all of this stuff?
I wonder if the Hollywood movie of Raiders of the Lost Ark isn't even more factual than that.
Wow.
It's the Holy Grail, isn't it? It is the Christian Holy Grail. So anyone that holds the Grail holds salvation and power. And the Ark would have existed. It probably doesn't exist anymore in its original form. The idea, however, may persist. And so we might transfer, and this is what I believe in the case of the so-called Zimbabwean Ark of the Drum. It is a traditional Southern Zimbabwe vendor, because we've got to be careful of modern borders, Southern Zimbabwe, South Africa drum, and it might be being referred to as the Ark of the Covenant, but it's just a drum. The concept of the Ark is, this is an important artifact. Our tradition talks about this Ark, so we will transfer that idea to the drum. There are many groups in Zimbabwe and other areas where drums are important. The certain drum in the Victoria Falls is supposed to have led the communities to the area before it fell over the edge and is supposed to beat underneath the waterfall. So there's lots of these sort of drum ideas. So I don't believe the drum, having seen it, even before Tudor Parfitt came and made a big scene here about it. I don't believe it is the Ark of the Covenant. It is a nice drum. It is significant historically. It's valued by those people, but it's not the actual Ark. So I can understand why somebody in Ethiopia, if they truly believe that that artifact is the Ark, they would give their lives, because the people have put their values, their whole identity on some artifact. I think in modern society we put our identity on money, but that's our nature of our sort of society today. I think it's simply a drum. It has been given the association of Ark of the Covenant, and since Tudor Parfitt started coming to this country in 1992, he obviously met a lot of people, and he has given his ideas forth, which then gets incorporated into the people's own stories. Again, we've also had missionaries in this country, in this area, where a lot of the missionaries, both Christian and Islamic missionaries, who have brought in their own stories about the Bible, etc. So today's people are a product not of some pristine African peoples. They've had ideas integrated into them, and they've selected some. And that's the whole issue of acculturation.
Another thing that's fascinating about that drum is the drum that they're talking about. Is that the original one, though, within the culture, or is that a replica?
It just seems to me, it looks like a replica. It might be 200-300 years old, and certainly not going back to the time of the flight to Israel and everything else.
Right. Wow. Not even go back to medieval time period, like the.
No, I doubt it.
Yeah. All right. So let me ask you this now. So Zimbabwe, the culture, what is it like living in Zimbabwe? I'm gonna get back to the Lemba in a minute, but what is it like as far as a president, prime minister, as far as the economy, as far as the status quo? Is it like, because I'm originally from Jamaica, and Jamaica is pretty much run by 28 families. And I mean, people hate to hear me talk about my home country, but I like to tell the truth. Pretty much 28 families who have benefited and continue to benefit. in that country. So it's a capitalistic society. Of course, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. And capitalism has basically taken over the whole world. And then you have the IMF, the World Bank, got to pay them back and so forth. So what is it like in Zimbabwe as far as a culture? Do you have like neighborhoods where the upper echelons live and the people who are the middle class, and you have the lower middle class? What is it like living there?
Exactly the same as Jamaica. The same colonial experience, I would say. Yes, we had a white elite, and it comes with independence that begins to break down, especially with the land reform implemented by Robert Mugabe in 2000, that broke the sort of white power base. Just the same story as you will know from home. And today, Zimbabwe is a really complex country. It's home, but it suffers from a lot of its own problems. And one of the greatest problems is heritage, actually, whereby groups persist in trying to push their chosen version of the past. So we have a political elite which won the country through a civil war. And so they feel they are therefore they deserve the country and everything in it. And they control the media, they control the education system. So we've had, especially for the last, I'd say particularly the 30 years, first 30 years of independence, we're now 40 years, we had an education system that was promoting a version of heritage, which basically bolstered the bourgeoisie, the new bourgeoisie. And the net result is we do have those distinctions. Unfortunately, because of the political meltdown in this country, we have lost a lot of this middle class. You were talking about the middle class. So we've got the ruling elite, then we've got the majority of the workforce who will be surviving on certainly probably a lot less than $1 a day. You know, there is no, I mean, we've got officially, if you want to use the hard definition of employment that excludes sort of part-time and retail on the side of the road, we've got maybe 90% unemployment. So most of the people will survive by however they do. I mean, so I just always, I don't know. Zimbabweans are amazing in terms of how they manage to get by. So you've got the poor, you've got the elites, and we were getting quite a well-developed middle class, quite well-educated middle class, thanks to the policies of Robert Mugabe in terms of education. But as things got worse, most of that middle class has left. So we really do have a two-class system rather than some. And I mean, most of that middle class, where do they live? They live in South Africa, Australia, UK, America. And we've become a net exporter of skills. And those people never come back.
Right, they don't come back at all.
So
Let me ask you this. How much is the US dollar worth in Zimbabwe?
The official rate or the unofficial rate? Because the official rate, officially it's set at $1 is worth 80, I think it's about 88 Zimbabwe dollars. But on the black market rate, it ranges from about 150 to 230 Zimbabwe dollars to a US dollar.
Wow.
And it could get,
you know, it's funny. You know, you just said something that's very important. I had a eureka moment.
Oh, good.
You just said that there's a conversation about connecting or debating what path is I'm paraphrasing, is the right path. You know, what's the right story? And one of the stories is that they come from the ancient Israelites. Now, in Jamaica, ironically, you have a group that says they are the 12 tribes of Israel. It seems like in these societies where they were conquered, because I always tell people this, Jamaica never had a black prime minister until P.J. Patterson. They actually had Hugh Shearer in the late 60s or whatever for like 1 year. But Jamaica, when people think of Jamaica, they're talking about a culture which is supposed to be a black farmer Africans coming there. Over 1 million Africans came through Jamaica. And tell me, when you get your independence, you had a white family ruling. You had Bustamante, Norman Manley, Michael Manley. You're talking about white people. And coincidentally, one of the prime ministers, Edward Seaga, used to go to school with George Bush, CIA connection. And with that CIA connection, he was able to, the US had what's called like Red Scare. They thought Jamaica was going to become
communist.
What do you call it? Communist, because they were friends with Cuba and Russia. So CIA sent this guy, Seaga, to run for prime minister. And this guy was funded by the US government. It's not a conspiracy story. It's a real story. So Jamaica used to get flour and the basic stuff to cook food. They used to get it on ships. So the US government stopped the ships, said, listen, and the people would starve. They would be fighting for whatever is left. And the guy would run for prime minister and said, if you vote for me, you'll get all the food and the flour and sugar and rice and all this stuff. And it was true. And the US government did that. And the people voted for this guy. And that guy was like a Syrian, Persian white guy. Seaga run the country for years. So there was no black skinned guy running the country until 1993. Think about this, ladies and gentlemen. From 1962 to 1993, you had, where's the black guys that's ruling? So now you have the Rastas that come up with Leonard Howell and the 4 different groups, and they're saying that Haile Selassie is God reincarnated, and they're the true Israelites. He's the Lion of Judah, and he's from the line of Solomon, like he claims in the Kebra Nagas and all that craziness. So now they're saying he is the guy, and we are the people. Same thing like the Lemba. We are the people from the ancient Israelites. We are, we're special. And I feel the cultures in these countries, it's the same thing. I'm sure if you go to any country in Africa, now a lot of them are springing up saying, oh, we Israelites, this guy in Ghana, he woke up one day in the 70s. Oh, I had a dream. I was, I'm a Jew and all. It's just craziness. So now in America, I'm talking to folks who thinks that we are the people from the Bible. And it's funny. It's like Raiders of the Lost Ark 5.0. It's craziness.
Why are they undermining their own African identity? Why do they have to find somebody else to hang their own identity on? They should celebrate their own traditions, celebrate their own heritage. And that's where I have this big issue with the so-called Lemba. They must accept first and foremost that they are African. Their roots are here. Some of them might have genetic mix-up, that's fine. But they are essentially African, and they should celebrate themselves being African first and foremost. Stop depending on somebody else. It's a dependency syndrome. And unfortunately, you see, really, we haven't got time, but basically in Zimbabwe, the Great Zimbabwe debate was all about, in the Rhodesian era, trying to deny an African origin. And as they couldn't prove that it was built by Egyptians or Phoenicians or anyone else, then the sort of myth changed to that the Lemba built it, because obviously these were people with black blood, with white blood mixed in, so they would be the people that make it. Because of course, obviously, black people couldn't do it. And that's the sort of logic which underlined the original debate about the Lemba. And it was picked up, probably not intentionally, not by academics like Parfit. And I'm not calling him a racist. It's just a concept that gets brought into the academic world and discussed, and it becomes almost accepted that this group is different from the others. And that's where I have a big problem.
Yeah, it's funny that, I mean, it's logical. I mean, they had an article about the Lemba from 1999. They went back in, they actually did a whole nother study that I noticed a lot of academics don't talk about, the Lemba Revisited, where it talks about going, because I mean, when you look at science, it's all about advancement. There's no, it's this way 1999, so it can't change. You know, science evolved. And that's what the greatness about science. With religion, though, it can't evolve. It has to be this way, or you're just a disbeliever or a heretic. You know? So with science, people forget that 1999, when I think Parfit had it, it done in 1996, the results came out in 1999, I believe. And it said that they were connected to the people in the Levantine region, which is cool. I don't have any problems with that. But then another study was done, I think 2012, the Lemba Revisited, where it points out clearly that those people are connected, but it seems more of a connection for a shorter time period. You know, I guess because of the biological, the molecular clock, they could tell how far, at what time period people come into there. So it looks like it was probably some Islamic traders. That seems like the way that the consensus is going. But the Lemba Revisited, no one is talking about that article. They talk about the article from 15 years or 20 years before, but the correction or the improvement on the science allowed them to look at it and say, nah, these people are more from the Yemen region, around, which makes sense because those eras did a lot of trading. So it makes sense for the Zimbabwe, you know. What is it that Zimbabwe, by the way, was trading? Because I don't know much about the Zimbabwe culture.
Ivory, gold and ivory, to a lesser extent copper and iron, but those were the basic exports. And then imports, well, it was trinkets really, beads and pottery, but cloth. Forget, cloth was really important. We tend to think of Zimbabwe as being in Africa and hot. Well, actually, it gets really cold in winter here. And so cotton, cloth, etc., would have come in from China and India, and Indonesia in particular. So my ideas are that we have this constant movement and change. Look, right down the east coast of Africa, we have the Swahili. Now, the Swahili are not a lot of academics have this image maybe of Yemenese peoples. They're not, they're African peoples. And they have their own tradition of architecture and trading, and they've traded for centuries. And it's just like in modern countries like the United States, it's a mix. But there will be people who will choose to emphasize I am Polish for political reasons, or I'm Irish since we are in that week of St. Patrick's.
Yeah. What's the future for you as far as, I know you do works with museums and all that stuff, but what's the future for you as far as moving forward? Do you plan to come out with a book? You plan to do some different studies? What do you plan to work on?
No, obviously with this COVID-19, a lot of work has come to a halt. I'm really not sure what I'm going to do next. I've potted in all these sort of things and just never found it going anywhere. So I don't know. I will continue probably publishing little papers. I will continue doing a couple of small little guidebooks. I mean, I just finished one sort of trying to make a popular book on rock art, on the rock art of Zimbabwe, to take it to the public. Not really a financially viable project, but that's what I do.
Okay. All right. Let me see if there's any questions for you in the audience. If you guys have any questions, let's let me see. Let me see. All right. So before we even get out of here, because I know you have the internet issues, we've been on for 34 minutes, so we made it. We made our goal.
Amazing. It did freeze a couple of times on my side.
Okay. Okay. what do you how do you think moving forward? Do we sit back and allow the Lemba to just do their own thing, or do we just, do we leave them alone, or do we try to educate more? Because I know you have a educational background. What do you think is the best way to go about it?
I'm going to be controversial. I'm going to say I think we should encourage them in it because it's part of their identity. But then we should encourage other communities to be proud of their identity. So if they wish to emphasize that, well and good for them. I have no objection, but then they mustn't treat other communities as downtrodden. And I will give equal value to the traditionalist vendor who believe in the Python dance and all the could I say the African face of the vendor, the community in which the Lemba exists. In Zimbabwe, the rest of the Shona communities in which the Lemba exist. We must emphasize their culture as equal. I'm not saying we should chop them down and stop them, because you try stop anyone wanting to express their own identity, you just make it go underground and it's a problem. So let them continue it, but then let's make everybody equal and celebrate everybody's diverse heritage.
Right, definitely. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, listen, man, this is Rob Burnett. Check him out on Facebook. He is a troublemaker. He is, definitely is. He definitely is a troublemaker. But I do want to thank you for taking the time out to have this conversation, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Oh, before you leave, what is the national dish for Zimbabwe? I don't know anything about Zimbabwe.
Sadza, ground maize. It's like a porridge, a dry, coarse ground maize. Like but think of it as a porridge, not nice, flattened out like you get in America. And this is just a big, heavy, crushed maize, which you eat with your hands, and you dip it into a relish, be it vegetables or, if you are the elite, meat.
Okay. All right. Hold on one second here. Let me do this. Yeah, this gentleman in the audience said that I was saying a farce about, well, let me help him out for a little bit. You know what? I'm not even going to respond to the gentleman in the chat. I'm going to deal with that. Oh, yeah, we have a question. What is the question? What is the time period for the small tribe of Black Jews you mentioned? What is the timeline?
Okay, so they are found in a small town called Rusapi in eastern Zimbabwe, and they have been a distinct group from about 1910 onwards. A very small group, and their synagogue is very conservative, actually. And they set themselves apart. So it's a very small group, but it's what I'm getting at is the same with the Lemba. It's taking somebody else's culture, acculturation, and celebrating it. I don't think they have such time depth.
Okay. Maremba Akawanda Koperenga Me Zivishavani. I don't know what that is. Somebody's trying to. Sadza. That's what it's called?
Sadza. Okay. Yep.
Audience. Okay.
And somebody obviously is coming from the old towns of Mberengwa and Zishivani. Those are towns where there is a sizable Aremba population within the host Shona communities. So you've clearly picked up some Zimbabwean in the diaspora.
Wow. All right, man. Seems like a beautiful culture over there. I hope it gets better eventually. But I know people have been saying that for years.
Exactly.
What is your hope for Zimbabwe to carry on for the next 30, 40 years? What do you think, what do you hope will happen with Zimbabwe?
I hope that we can grow out of the liberation historiography that we have been in. And in particular, I really hope that we could find a way that the younger generations will, and unfortunately, I don't know how it's going to happen, escape from this culture of corruption.
Wow.
Because this is our biggest problem. It's endemic in everything you do. And it's sad, because I look back 20, 30 years ago, yes, there probably was some degree of corruption, but now it's just disgraceful.
Okay. All right, let me share my screen for the gentleman who gave me a donation. And he said, where did I get this information from? Let me get his name right, because he made a donation. What's his name? Legendary Top Cats donated $1.99. Source: 1 million Africans went to Jamaica. He said it's fake news. If you're not familiar with Hilary Beckles, he's the guy that's in charge of reparations for the Caribbean that got over 200 million from Scotland because for research that his students did. If you read the Jamaican Observer on March 23rd, which is today, he talks about what Britain owes the Caribbean. And if you scroll down, young man, he also stated that of the 1.2 million Africans who were imported into Jamaica during slavery, 300,000 survived at emancipation. All right. So just for the record, I didn't make it up. It's not fake news. This is not Fox News. This is the Dagger Squad. All right. I don't know why people, and the craziest thing is most of the folks that ended up in Jamaica ended up either in Barbados, Virginia, or South Carolina. In the 1700s, most of the slaves between 1750 and the 1800 came from Jamaica, which is crazy when you think about it. This is why the reparations argument is very confusing. It's very, very confusing. All right. All right, listen, my new friend from Zimbabwe, I want to say thank you, and you're gonna come back. What do you do? You're gonna come back. You have to come back.
Well, I will indeed.
I want to know more about Zimbabwe. I want to know more about the culture. I don't know anything about it.
Well, you know which Facebook page to look at.
Yeah, and I'm sure I have a couple of people from Zimbabwe.
As you know, I've been wandering around the country during COVID, visiting places which I wouldn't normally get to, and recording stuff. All
right. Hey, thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it. Hey, much respect. Thanks for having you on. All right.
Peace. Pleasure.
I will email you.
Brilliant. Thank you, sir. Nyabonga.
All right.
Cheers, Ed.
All right, family. So I just want to thank Mr. Burnett for coming on. And I'm gonna I want to say thank you guys. I reached out to Sonetta this morning because I think I need to do a response to a video from last night. But I'm gonna come back live right now so we could do a quick after show. All right. I don't want to spoil this show with anything. It's just been 42 minutes, short and sweet and to the point, and we just do what we gotta do. Much love, much respect for the people that support the Dagger Squad and what I do on a daily basis. Peace and love, and thank you. I'm gonna come right back.